Good evening and welcome back, listeners, to the Match Grade Podcast. My name is Ed, and with me, as always, is Dave and Matt from Rochester Personal Defense. Good evening, guys.
Hey, what's going on?
So tonight we're talking about non-lethal options for home defense. Now, before we kick this off, disclaimer that all of the options that we are going to mention tonight for non-lethal, these rules are applicable specifically for New York, not New York City, and the laws of your state or city may be different, so always refer to your city or state laws to make sure you're not violating anything. The following topics that we discuss are legal at the time of recording. We're not legal experts, we're not lawyers, but we do have quite a bit of experience with all of these items that we are going to mention, and all of them are based upon actual experience, not online reviews or literature.
Yeah, we went hands-on with this stuff.
Talking about non-lethal, less than lethal options, Dave, is there really a difference? Like, what the heck is less than lethal?
So if we go into the levels, people think less than lethal isn't going to kill anybody. It's more like less lethal, which means it's less likely to kill somebody or cause serious physical injury. In our New York state laws, we've got lethal force is defined as something that is going to hurt somebody really bad or it could kill them. And that's deadly force. Whereas less than lethal is less likely to cause that serious physical injury, serious harm, or death. Some people, as Matt, we were talking about earlier, some people want to say it's non-lethal.
Yeah, there's really no such thing as completely non-lethal.
I could slap somebody at the top of a set of stairs and they'd fall down the stairs or break their neck. I used a form of lethal force,
exactly,
but my intention was different, right? So
Correct.
That's where you got to worry about it. But in the end, the result, still somebody got seriously hurt or killed. So we got to make that distinction.
And people forget about the serious physical injury part of the law.
Oh, yeah.
Lethal force includes serious physical injury.
Yep.
And all of these things are capable of causing at least a serious physical injury and a small potential for death if something goes wrong. So, yeah.
So if something is less lethal or less than lethal, but inadvertently results in deadly physical force, injury, or death, does that turn it into lethal? Or is it still less lethal, but used badly? Like, where does the distinction kind of lie?
I guess it depends on the eye of the DA.
Yes.
Let's put it this way. A lot of law is based on intent. If your intent was to seriously hurt somebody or kill them, then that's a different level of charge or a different level of exposure you're going to face. If your intent was to not hurt them or not kill them or not injure them severely, then your intention was different, so could be a different level of involvement at the end of this, meaning a different criminal charge.
A lot of it boils down to your intent at that point.
Yeah.
Right?
If your intent was to push somebody away from you and they tripped on a curb behind you that you didn't see and they fell and hit their head and now they have a very serious physical injury and they split their skull open. Okay, at least if your intent wasn't to shove them to the ground and split their skull open, but it was just to push them away from you, that's a whole different story.
Right.
If you go online and you were to look for the most effective or most popular, less lethal options, these three are going to come up. We're talking about spray, we're talking about taser, and we're talking about Berna. So, guys, why these three?
A lot of this is because they're so portable and people think they're just easy to obtain, and in some cases they might be. But here in New York, it's a little tougher on some ways because of the legalities and accountability. Is pepper spray legal in New York? I didn't know it was legal.
Okay.
Yes, it is. I don't know if it's, at least in my career, if it's ever been illegal during the 25 years I've been involved in this.
It's always been legal,
limited.
but it's limited. Correct.
Yeah.
So what does that mean as far as limited, but legal but limited?
They'll confuse spray with tear gas, like what police officers used to carry, but now they just use to clear out riots. But they used to have a mix of spray and tear gas, and the state decided, no, we don't want everybody doing that, so they pulled it back, and everybody assumed it went away, and all of a sudden it's back again.
Right. And I mean, even with spray, there is certain size limits
Yes.
and concentration limits that you can have in New York State. So not all pepper sprays are legal in New York, and any pepper spray that has CS in it is, which is tear gas, is not legal in New York.
So you need to find a pepper spray that is 100% pepper spray, no tear gas additives, anything like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it's also limited, it's limited by concentration and size. So it's
limited where you can purchase too. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Authorized sellers are the only place you can purchase.
right. So if we look at, let's see, if we look at the criteria, what are we going to judge them on? Let's talk about effective range.
Yep.
Okay. What's the effective range of spray?
10 feet.
10 to 15 feet at most.
At the most 15. But
Depending on the configuration, you've got a cone, you've got a fogger, you've got a stream, you've got a mix.
Right.
If you got the stream, you're going to have a little more accuracy. One of them is called a forced cone, so it's kind of like a cone with jet behind it.
Yep.
That is a little more focused, so it's not like a pinpoint stream. It's a little wider, so
wider.
you can be a little less accurate. But the problem is it cuts the range down.
by about half.
Yeah.
So
You'll see people trying to use pepper spray at 20, 25 feet, and
no.
so the range isn't great, but it is supposed to be a close-up kind of defensive tool anyways.
It is.
If you're resorting to spray, I'm guessing you're probably in an encounter that you don't want to be, and you're
Yeah.
pretty up close for it.
And you also only have about 10 seconds worth of spray in the average size can.
Yeah.
So, maybe 3 good blasts is all you got in that can.
Yeah,
So
and it does take a second or two to start taking effect too.
it does.
So it's not immediate.
Absolutely immediate.
Yeah.
Correct.
So the range, okay, not too bad, still close in. Ease of use, we kind of already delved into. It's
Pretty easy.
fairly intuitive.
Yeah.
Takes a little bit of practice depending on the mechanism of delivery, depending if it's got like a safety toggle where
Yep.
you turn it sideways, or if
Or
you have to
flip
depress
cap.
and break a seal.
Right.
The brand we use, what I tell people is they've got little knurlings on the front where you put your fingers. You just point your knuckles at the thing you want to hit with the pepper spray, and you're okay.
To press the button.
I think that's a great feature because a lot of people express concerns. If you find yourself in kind of a low light type of environment and you're fumbling either in your pocket or your purse, the last thing you want to do is spray yourself.
You want to spray where you can kind of feel where it's pointing without having to look at it.
Where do you get it? Spray was limited. That's why I kind of use the word limited, because it wasn't like you can just order it online. You couldn't go into every store and buy it.
Right.
Although I have seen it in some odd places. The idea is, here in New York, it's got to be an FFL, a gun dealer. Oddly enough, a licensed pharmacist. And then the other one is any authorized seller. But nobody knows exactly what that means. So, but it is what it is. But it's not that hard to obtain. You just got to find the right place to get it. It's fairly inexpensive. $10 to $15 for one canister. New York makes you fill out a form that says basically you're over 18 and you're not going to use it in a crime,
Or prohibited from having it.
yeah, or you're not a prohibited person. So you just sign that, and the seller keeps that, and you're on your way.
As long as you're legal to buy it, doesn't require a special permit, doesn't require a special license,
Nope.
doesn't require prescription in the case of the pharmacist.
Yeah, really.
So as long as you're legal to buy it and you can find a licensed dealer for it, it seems like it's fairly easy to purchase and obtain.
A little bit of research, a little bit of effort, low involvement to get it, and you've got yourself some.
So the other big one, and this one's already used in law enforcement, and I think there was a lot of question of whether it's legal for civilians and the average person, but tasers.
So you're the taser instructor, Dave.
Yeah,
So,
I'm the certified
what's your
taser
take
guy.
on tasers?
I have been tased a couple times in training, and I can tell you,
Yes.
I know what it feels like, and it's not painful. It's annoying because you can't move. And people grunt because they're just trying to fight through it. If you watch videos of people getting tased, so the taser is less of an electrical current than a Christmas tree bulb. It's far less. And what it does is it interrupts the outgoing muscular signal from the brain. So neuromuscular incapacitation is what it's called. So it interrupts that signal going out. That's why you don't feel the pain from it. You only feel pain if you fall down during the exposure. But it just stops you from being able to control your muscles. And, in the civilian model, it's 30 seconds. The cycle runs for 30 seconds and it shuts off. So it's not a bad option. It's still limited in range though. It's max 15 feet.
Yeah, absolute max.
Max, like this thing shoots the little barbs, the little harpoons out.
So you can actually get the one that shoots the little barbs and sticks in people and
Yeah,
zap
and
them?
it's got
Okay.
the copper wires that blow. And
Okay.
the Taser, the civilian models will also do what we call a contact stun as well if you needed to, but it's a shorter range and it might not be that effective.
So touch stun them,
Yeah,
basically?
in my previous lives we call it drive stun or a contact stun. So, but the barbs go out, they spread at about, by the time they get to 15 feet, they're probably about 1.5 feet apart. And they stick in whatever they hit and they start conducting electricity.
How effective are they on someone wearing like clothing? Like heavy clothing?
They'll go through a leather jacket,
Okay.
a heavy leather jacket. All they got to do is get within 1 inch of the skin.
Okay.
And they'll conduct. It's not perfect, but it's better than not getting close. Now, also bear in mind that you're going to be probably moving. They're going to be moving. They're not going to stand still and wait for you to hit them.
Oh, come on.
So bad guys just don't play by the rules, apparently. We've kind of segued into the ease of use. They're not that hard to use. The civilian models that we train with from Taser, it's the Pulse and the Pulse 2. They have a little flashlight, a little LED bulb flashlight that it's not bright, but it's bright enough. And it's got a tiny laser on there that's going to give you an indicator approximately about where the top barb's going to go.
Okay.
And then the bottom one's going to drop at about a 7 or 8 degree angle. So it's going to give you an idea what you're going to hit at. So it helps you aim. All you got to do is just flip the little lever, take the safety off. You pull the trigger. There's no recoil on this thing. It just pops, and all of a sudden the barbs are going downrange. And I've had people actually remark that it's way quieter than they thought it was going to be because they're used to, it kind of looks like a gun, so it must make a lot of noise.
So I gotta ask, as far as the barbs go and firing it, is this more of like one and done type of defense system, you would say? Like, you got to make sure your aim is good and your barbs are on target because you're really not going to get a second shot.
Yeah, you can't coil it back up and try again. And unless you're carrying a spare cartridge with you, it's going to take you probably 3 or 4 seconds to pull the old one off and put a new one on there to hit them again. And in that time, you could probably just throw the unit down and run. You just threw something at them. They're going to be a little put off. They're going to be a little bit going, wait a minute, what happened here?
So not good for multiple attackers, though.
As Ed was leading up to, it's a one-off. It's one deployment. You can cycle the shock every 30 seconds. You can renew the cycle and keep them on the ground, keep them blocked up. But after a while, they're going to figure it out.
You got that 30-second gap in order.
Yeah, they're going to be counting down, baby. And the minute they hit 29, they're going to start thinking, I'm going to do something real quick. I think the biggest thing I remember is the barbs hurt worse than the actual tasing. Tasing, you didn't really feel any pain. But at the end, you felt the barbs. You knew they were in your, into the back muscles. When they pulled them out, it was just like, ow. It's almost like pulling a fish hook out, and then they give you these really cool little dot Band-Aids to put on your holes.
What about being able to obtain it? You are legal to have and obtain a taser without a license, without a permit?
You don't need a license. You don't need a permit. Again, there's an age restriction. I believe Taser, you got to be 21 or above to possess and use it. Catch is, you can go online and try to buy one. You're not going to be able to get one. No, nobody will send one to New York. Again, in New York, you've got to go through somebody who is a dealer for them, who has access to them. We're both a dealer and trainer for Taser. There is a little bit of cost to them too. They're not cheap. You're in the $300 to $400 range for a Taser,
or a good used pistol. Yeah,
it's a pretty solid unit. I've trained quite a few people on them. People have practiced with them because they bought extra cartridges to practice. And as long as you keep good batteries in it and you've got decent cartridges and you don't mess with them, you don't break them, that thing's going to work.
What about for the purposes of concealed carry? Are they bulkier than like a concealed carry handgun? How much larger is it? Do you need, like big mittenny hands in order to manipulate it?
They're pretty skinny. They're probably about 3/4 of an inch to maybe an inch thick. And then they're about the size of a compact pistol. They're gun shaped. They got a handle, they got a trigger, they got a top end. They look like a gun. That's why, when we're talking to people about them, they have black and yellow and some other colors. we kind of advise people, don't get a black one because people are going to assume it's a gun and it might create a situation
Another
that you don't want. If I pull out a taser because I'm in a less than lethal encounter, I don't want bystanders to think, oh my God, that guy's pointing a gun at that other guy. Things can get really crazy pretty quick. But the ability to obtain them isn't too bad, but you've got to go to somebody who is authorized to sell them and who can provide them. And you probably want to get a little training on them too.
So that brings us to the third kind of recommended or most popular option for defense, the Berna system, also known as
They call it a launcher.
Air launcher.
An air-powered
Air
launcher.
Really CO2 powered launcher, but air launcher.
So this being a podcast, obviously you can't see it. The people who are viewing this on YouTube will have some pictures and things like that thrown up on there. But the Berna launcher, tell me about this thing. Describe it to me. What is this?
It essentially is a air pistol, and it looks like a pistol that takes magazines and will shoot 68 caliber projectiles, round balls generally, around 350 to 400 feet per second. And it will shoot a variety of projectiles. Kinetic, what they call kinetic, which are usually hard plastic polymer spheres. And then it will even shoot pepper balls to break and release a pepper powder, much like your pepper spray.
So just to clarify for our listeners, this is not a gun in the traditional sense. You're not shooting.
It is legally not a firearm. It does not use cartridges or propellant based from powder. It uses CO2 to drive these balls, and fire them downrange. So not considered a firearm, is not subject to the restrictions that there are on handguns in most places.
So it uses a variety of ammunition, less lethal ammunition. You mentioned a couple different types. Can you go into that for our listeners a little bit?
The kinetic projectiles, which are, again, round polymer balls that are extremely hard, do quite a bit of damage when they hit. They will leave severe welts, bruising, break skin, even through at least light and to moderate clothing. And then there's the pepper balls, which are pepper spray basically in a little ball that breaks when it hits and gives you the same effect, the tearing eyes, the coughing, the itchy burning skin, and all of that. The great advantage of the Berna is its standoff distance. They are accurate effectively. They'll say to 20 yards. I've seen them probably at least 15 yards. They truly are accurate and effective too. So that standoff distance, way more than spray, definitely more than the Taser.
The range, accurate range, obviously the closer the better. At least it gives you some distance to react better instead of being up close or almost like hand-to-hand distance.
And you can slow someone down and give yourself time to escape, which is really the idea behind all of these things.
I think the idea behind these is I'm going to fling something at you that's going to sting a lot or hurt a lot, and I'm going to interrupt that thought process loop that you're trying to do, and I'm going to give myself time to get away. And I can only imagine being on the downrange end of this. If somebody were to pull one of these things and disengage the safety and point it at you, you're going to look at that gigantic 68, 69 caliber hole on the end of this thing and think you're about to get hit with a Mack truck.
I've watched them blow through 4 or 5 layers of cardboard and not even slow down. So
We're going to have to do some testing.
yeah, absolutely.
We're going to definitely have to do some testing. I want to see what the capabilities of this thing really are. How hard is the trigger? Is it like a heavier
It's like
spring on
it's
it?
like mild to moderate, I should say. Double action pull.
So you
definitely not like a
really-
striker fire.
Yeah, you're not going to accidentally squeeze and set this thing off.
No, especially not because the way you normally would carry it, it's driven with CO2 cartridge, and that cartridge is not popped, it's not penetrated until you press the trigger that first time. So it's a really heavy trigger pull on that first trigger press. Popping the CO2 cartridge and then you're firing the first shot. So
First trigger press, you mentioned the advantage of this system over the Taser or the spray is it's not a one-off. You can hold, I'm guessing, multiple.
Between 5 and 8 projectiles.
Yep.
Gotcha. And you're having these basically golf ball size
A little
projectiles.
smaller, but pretty close.
Smaller coming at you at
300 feet per second or so.
And also, like a pistol, you can actually carry a spare magazine, and each CO2 cylinder is good, depending on the exact model, 18 to 25 shots. So you can reload it as fast as you can reload a regular like semi-auto pistol. So you easily could get between 10 and 14 shots on an attacker.
Got to reiterate again, the idea of the Berna system is to deter an attacker so you can either get away from the situation or, find an alternative, to exit, the type of encounter that you're in, not to cause lethal damage. This is not an alternative, to a firearm.
This is more of a stopgap among somebody's, defensive tool career.
As are all of these things. I mean, none of them are going to, be a one-shot stop type thing. This is hopefully a deterrent to someone that's wants to cause you or someone else harm.
Well, if you think about it, you look at the three options now. We've got spray, we've got the taser option, and we got the Berna. Actually, all three approach, I guess you could say, the response to an aggressor in different ways. Yeah, let's look at the spray real quick. It's a pain compliance thing because your skin's going to feel like it's burning. It's also a respiratory inhibitor where it kind of makes it tough to breathe. You're going to cough, your eyes are going to water, so it really just affects you physically. And then in turn there is some pain involved with the burning sensation. Right?
Well, and I think with the spray, the other big effect that it has is it causes you to clamp your eyes shut because of watering and burning. And you become less effective because you can't see. Oh.
Exactly. And then we have the taser. It's not a pain compliance device, but it's an immobilizer.
Yeah, literally immobilized. Exactly.
It just stops you from being able to do a lot. And then you have the Berna, which is, it can be the pepper spray thing, but I'm sure that the pepper balls hit with a little bit of force because they got to get broken.
They supposedly have about the same force as the kinetic balls when they hit.
So there's a double whammy.
Yeah, so you get pain plus pepper.
Yeah. So you get hit with that sucker, and there's a welt. And then you start crying about it, and then you start really coughing and crying about it.
Right.
It's a little bit of pain compliance, a little bit of a mix of that impact, and then the pepper if you're using the pepper ball option.
Is this a guarantee that someone's going to stop? I would say no.
No.
But I think it is, like you said, a step.
It's going to slow them down.
Potential. It at least will slow them down and buy you time, and it may get them to stop if they're not super determined.
And the other thing, the ability to obtain, we've known people that have bought them off their website. And they've sent them right here to New York, website, right? You can get them from us. So you've got to find basically a seller, or you got to buy them from the factory.
But they are fairly easy to obtain. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing special you need to buy one of these.
That's right. There might be a little bit of training because you got to get familiar with it. Having somebody come in cold to this item. I'm familiar with firearms. I'm familiar with a lot of different tools. When I get my hands on one, I'm going to sit in there and I'm going to start like, okay, how does this work? What does this do?
So there's definitely some quirks and nuances to these things that you really got to pay attention to. And I think if you are a firearms guy and you pick one of these up, there's going to be a couple surprises that you're not expecting. So you really have to kind of learn this system.
Yeah, it's a different system. But the idea of learning how to use it is the key. Just like spray, just like taser, and the Berna, you've got to get some exposure to somebody who can tell you what to do with it, how to do it, when to use it, which we'll talk about later.
All right, guys. So you've heard three of the most popular options. Again, spray, taser, Berna, all three legal to use in the state of New York, don't require a special permit. Don't require a special license. You do have to get them from a licensed dealer or an FFL or somewhere legally able to sell them. And they can't be used in the commission of a crime. All right, moving on to our next section. All firearms guys, I think, are going to love this next section because their go-to, if your firearm does not work or you can't get to it, are knives. I'm sure every house in America has one, whether it's a kitchen knife or a pocket knife or, some other type of knives. So that is the big debate, isn't it? There's a lot of myths out there, and there are a lot of truths. And the biggest one that I guess we could start with are knives are less lethal.
Yeah, less deadly, right? So I just taught a class the other day, and we got onto the force continuum thing, and we were talking about what items fall into that level. We got to knives, edged weapons. He's like, well, aren't knives, I'm just going to carry a knife. That way, if I don't have a gun, I can carry a knife, and I can take that anywhere, right? And I said, well, you got to think about, though, it's the same level of force as a gun. You are going to be employing something that will cause serious physical injury and might cause somebody to die. And I've had people who were MEs, medical examiners and doctors, and they're like, I'd rather treat somebody who got shot than somebody who got cut or stabbed because the wound profiles are way different, and usually in some cases in some of the knife attacks, especially if it's a slashing attack, they're far more severe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot more blood vessels involved. There's a lot more flesh involved. There's a lot more nerve damage. There's just, it's crazy. You know, people think, oh, I'll just pull out a knife and it's like the Psycho movie. I'll show them the reflection and, you know, the world will change.
So knives are not less than lethal.
You know, you're out in public walking around with your clip-it knife that you know, are hanging out, your favorite Benchmade or CRKT or whatever, you know, Spyderco you're carrying or whatever brand that you want to. You're running around out there, you're already carrying a deadly weapon.
Deadly force, yeah.
We just look at it as a versatile tool as well. Every house has a knife. I don't know.
Probably in the kitchen.
I think we just blew somebody's mind because they're going to go, wait a minute. Yeah, every house has a lot of deadly weapons floating around in there. And everybody's been using a knife since probably 6 or 7 years old. I can't remember that far back to when my parents let me finally graduate to the steak knife instead of the butter knife. There is an age where you feel that your child's responsible enough to handle that sharp thing and they have the coordination.
So anyone can use a knife then? You don't have to be too skilled? Is that it?
Well, in a way, I tell people in a knife fight, you're going to get cut. It doesn't matter what skill level they have. The more skilled ones are going to be better at cutting you more.
What if you're going to be faster? For defense, how skilled do you have to be?
So I wouldn't say you got to be up against a very skilled individual.
No, I think an unskilled person can still hurt you pretty bad with a knife.
An unskilled individual can kill you just as well as a skilled guy.
That's true. That's true.
You know, the skilled guy will probably do it faster.
Yeah. If I'm using a knife, though, I mean, it's pretty close range. I'm going to be up close and personal.
You know, I've heard people say that, well, what if they throw it at me? You know, I've tried throwing hatchets and I've tried throwing knives. If I'm throwing a knife at you, you got really good odds of getting hit with the other end of the knife.
Yeah,
or
the blunt end.
The blunt end. It'll sting a little bit, but then I just threw away my weapon. I wouldn't count on that. You know, throwing a knife at somebody, you're better off just picking up a rock and throwing it at them. You'll probably do more damage.
For sure.
Keep the knife. You might need it when they get closer if you miss them. Knives are short range.
They are.
They're an arm's reach weapon. It's what a lot of people consider them at, maybe a little bit more than arm's reach.
Why do so many people carry a knife as a tool of last resort as opposed to a firearm? Like, what advantage would, the knife have?
They're very concealable.
I think ease of access is another big one. And acceptability, like you have been using a knife since you were a kid, right?
Yeah.
And most people don't have that aversion to a knife the way they would a gun or something else. So it's
you think about most people, their beginning knife was the little Swiss Army knife or the buck knife.
Grandpa's buck knife.
But nowadays, you get these thumb knives. You can just open with one hand. You can get assisted openers. You can get autos where it's just spring loaded and they're open faster, which is great if you're in a one-handed engagement. But they're very concealable. You can. I could probably hide, 60 knives on me, but hiding 60 guns on me is going to be pretty difficult. It's easier to throw them away if you need to get rid of them. Think about this. You can't throw a gun away.
Not easy.
That's probably, you're breaking the law on that one. They're disposing a gun just by throwing it in the garbage because it ran out of, it doesn't work anymore, or you broke it somehow. You can't do that.
Let's think about the other side of that. Rather than throwing it away, let's say you drop it, while you're trying to get away. If you drop a gun, that's a bad day.
I'm going to be a lot more scared. If I'm in a fight and I drop my knife, okay, no big deal. If I got to run away.
They got to catch me to use it.
Yeah. So, if I drop my knife while I'm running away, I'm going to run faster.
Right.
Okay? If I drop my gun while I'm running away, I need to run really fast, and I don't think I'm capable of going that fast.
Right.
1,000 feet per second or so. I'm not the Flash.
Knives don't run out of ammo.
They run out of edge if you cut really short. That's
a really bad fight.
Yeah. There are some advantages to it, but you also have to understand what the limitations are. There's a lot more consequences, I think, that people don't think about.
There's a lot more. Definitely.
You use one on somebody, it's going to be messy. I can guarantee you that.
Right.
And then the legal mess begins.
I mean, us coming from the concealed carry world, if we find ourselves in a knife fight, while we're concealed carrying, that's a pretty bad day.
It is a bad day.
And then there's that trope, that kind of carries over. You always fear the guy who has one gun because he probably knows how to use it. I would be very afraid of the guy who only carries one knife.
Or if you run across a guy who is really dedicated and his immediate default, he's going to a knife, that means he's probably practiced with it.
Yeah.
Right. So up to this point, we've talked about the definition of less than lethal or non-lethal, less lethal, and we talked about a couple of different options and tools as far as self-defense goes. Being that we live in an extremely litigious society, I'm sure people want to know, When is it legal for me to deploy these systems? When can I use them without finding myself in legal trouble? And I do have to emphasize again for our listeners that we are not lawyers. We are not legal experts. We are just going by the letter of the law. And these are some of the legal ramifications, to consider before you decide to use any of these.
So if you think about this, when we're talking about the levels of force, we call it the force continuum, where it starts off way in the bottom at verbal and ends up at the top with a deadly physical force, firearms and knives. Think of it as a pyramid. At the bottom, a wider range of application, but also a wider set of options for you. You have more things you can do early on.
When you can do them.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. At the verbal, you've got a whole bunch of stuff that you can do before it gets really bad.
I can yell at anybody pretty much without limited consequence.
Yeah. Some people think you're rude. Some people will know you're using self-defense. Who cares? But you can yell at a bunch of people. When we get up into the less than lethal, you've still got options, because we've talked about 3: spray, taser, and the Berna option. But there's a few more things out there, but these are like the most popular,
major
the
ones.
top 3 that come up all the time. When we get into the level of when you're getting into that deadly force, when we're teaching classes, we're actually telling you you're out of options. Right. And what is it you say in the classes about, using the right amount of force to...
Well, you got to use the right amount of force to solve the situation you're in.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
You can't use too much.
Can't use too much,
Right.
and you want to use enough to stop it as well.
You don't use enough, it's not going to work.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like the old Goldilocks fable. You got to use the right amount, not too much, not enough. It's got to be the right amount at the right time. So in the use category we're going to look at here, the spray, the taser, and the Berna option, the use is going to be sooner in the force continuum, in the encounter, than going to a firearm or a knife. Your options are still pretty viable at that level.
So, it's almost like if I'm feeling threatened, these are options.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have to be under threat of death at this moment to use these. But if I feel threatened, if I'm backed into a corner, these are options I have to get myself out of that situation.
It's more of your feelings than reality. You can feel threatened. You can feel like, okay, this is a very risky situation. I can start thinking about deploy these less lethal options because it's probably going to get me out of the situation, and I'm not going to cause a lot of pain, and I can get away a little bit more unscathed than if it gets too bad where I'm dealing with a knife or a gun or having to deploy a knife or a gun. Again, wider set of circumstances. It's a little more plausible. It's a little more reasonable, and you can articulate it better.
CYA stands for Can You Articulate?
Can you articulate?
Yep.
We always talk about there's a difference in policy versus law, right?
Yes, for
Might be
sure.
a company policy, but it's still legal to possess this thing.
Right. So you may get in trouble with the company or the institution,
Right.
but you won't get in legal trouble as
Yeah.
far as potential going to jail, etc.
Yep. And I'm not, if you guys are owning businesses out there and listen to this, don't get any ideas, but I've read some employee manuals and I've helped build a couple. They wanted to make firearms and spray
Prohibited.
in the facility or in the building or as an employee. But nowadays with the, Taser, when it picked up more in the civilian market, and now the Berna is getting into the civilian market a little more, they're not yet addressing those, and I hope they don't, because the Berna is not considered a firearm.
Nope.
Taser is not considered a firearm. It's not considered spray. It's a self-defense device, and so is the Berna. It's kind of like what kids would play with a CO2 pistol.
Like a
right?
pellet pistol.
Especially when you're teaching young kids to learn firearm safety, it's a CO2 pistol. It is less than lethal. Okay. So is spray, but for some reason they're fixated on spray. I don't know why.
So if you had one of these, then basically the idea is you might get in trouble with your company, but you won't go to jail. What I tell people honestly is you might not even get in trouble with the company, because are they going to want to put out there that you use this thing to defend yourself, and then, oh wait, but then we fired you for it?
They fired you for defending yourself against an unsafe situation that we didn't fix.
And you know what? If they do that, oh well.
Yeah.
I don't want to work there anyhow.
Yeah, and then there's probably a lawyer you can call for that too. But the carry and possess thing, you look at the laws between some of the lethal options, the ones that are going to cause serious physical injury and or could cause death, and then versus the less than lethal options. There's fewer laws that are attached to the less than lethal options.
Yeah, there's more places where you are
Fewer restrictions,
able to
right?
carry these things. Yep.
Yeah, more places you can carry. If some says firearms are banned in this location, right?
Yep.
Well, I have spray. I have a taser. I have a Berna. I'm going to carry it in
I've
there.
even seen in a security line getting into an event where someone had pepper spray. I've seen this more than once. And, they get caught for whatever reason with it. And they're like, oh, take that back to your car.
Yeah.
You think they're going to do that if you try to bring a gun in there?
It depends on who's at the line.
Chances are much more likely they're not going to be as generous in that situation.
So here's my clue. Whenever I'm going to like a new place, I want to get some intel, and I want to find out, are they searching people when I come in? What are they using to search? The idea is like, okay, if I see that they're searching bags and pockets and they're pulling, they're actually having people empty their pockets and stuff. All right, I'm not going to like going into that area because I feel that I am the best expert at my own safety and judgment on what I need to do to protect myself, and nobody else can fix that. They can't help that.
Right.
Okay. I'll still go in there, but at least I'll know what the rules are now. And then I'll start looking for some other environmental type weapons or some other things that I can use. Obviously, if they're going to prohibit me from carrying any kind of defensive tool in there, I need to know that. They find pepper spray on you or the burner, they're going to go, oh, it looks like a gun. Nope, it's not a gun. Oh, well, okay, take that pellet gun back to your hotel room or take it back to your car and, come on back in. And on the other stuff, all this stuff is also going to depend on your local laws too. We're basing a lot of our judgment on our familiarity with New York state law, but there are cities that have restrictions on possession of spray, maybe taser, maybe the Berna.
Maybe air guns.
We talked about the knives. There's definitely restrictions on knives.
A lot of restrictions on knives.
So you really got to learn what you can and can't do in your location, and quietly, discreetly find out what kind of ordinances, because that's typically what they are, or
usually
local law. But state law right now, under state law, pepper spray, taser, and Berna are fully legal. It just depends on your local attitude of your local city. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they say New York City is one of the best cities in the world, but from my perspective, they've got their own set of rules for some reason.
They definitely have their own set of rules.
It's between firearms and knives and spray and everything else. It's like its own little country. But yeah, you got to learn the laws. You got to learn. There's legal ramifications too that compound after the use of each of these items.
Right.
You spray somebody, that could be considered assault
In the wrong context. Yeah.
in the wrong context, right?
Yep.
Taser, same thing.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit more. I don't know. A Berna. Yeah, come on. You're throwing 68 caliber projectiles. Guys, do the math. Those aren't small little.
No. And they're gonna leave physical evidence.
Yeah. So you've got to be careful about make sure you're using this stuff at the right moment. We do training in the legalities of use of all of this stuff. Everything from your verbal, your hand-on skills, spray, taser, Berna, you name it, firearms, knives. We do training on it. So you got to learn when to use it, where it's applicable, how to use it, as well as what's going to happen to you afterwards.
Is important.
Wrapping up our legal ramifications of using any of these items, again, cannot emphasize enough, check your state, local laws in order to make sure you are in compliance. The next area that we're going to be talking about is mindset, the meat and potatoes of why someone would probably even be listening to this podcast episode in the first place about non-lethal.
There aren't any other questions about why they're still listening?
Exactly. The big one, the main one, I would say anybody wants to resort to using less lethal options for defense rather than a concealed carry firearm is, I am not ready to kill somebody. And that's a hard mindset, to get into, I think, for just about anyone, because we're not wired to do that. We're not sociopaths, at least not most of us are.
Most. Depends who you talk to. It's a very common statement from people. It's like, I don't know if I can kill somebody. Good.
The goal is to not kill someone, right? Ever.
The goal is to never get into a fight, but we can't avoid that. But the goal is to do everything you can to not have to use whether it's less than lethal or lethal force, because that just changes your life. So let's not make that life change unless it's worth it. We use a bunch of analogies. Is it worth dying for? Is it worth going to jail for? Well, okay, then you probably need to do something about it.
Yep.
But if you're not willing to sacrifice your life to fix that or go to jail.
We see this a lot.
Yeah.
And then we start bringing up certain circumstances. So we all have that point. But think about with these less than lethal options, does that give people something a little bit lower than that deadly force that they can go to before they have to get to that point where they're going to kill somebody.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like with the less than lethal, so there's less of a chance somebody could get seriously physically injured or dead.
Right.
That might make your conversion into the idea of self-defense easier.
Right.
It'll
exactly.
desensitize you a little bit.
Right. It's more acceptable and more easily palatable for someone.
Oh, if I can throw 68 caliber pellets at you, or I can tase you and lock your body up for 30 seconds, or I can spray you and make you feel like, your face is burning off.
They're more willing to do that.
Okay. Then I can get away and I can run away, and I really didn't hurt anybody because I'll feel
Right.
bad about that, right? But you made them comply with basically your wishes to leave you alone.
Correct.
But you didn't have to do some serious injury to do that.
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I'm not ready to kill somebody. That is a very, very adequate decision that a lot of people talk to us about. They don't know if they can get
they're
past
not
it yet
sure.
or not.
However, just so that people know, if deadly force is necessary, then some of these
might
things
be
are
what's
not
necessary.
It might be what's some of these things are not going to stop a very, very determined person.
Yeah.
You may end up having to go to that level. Anyways,
With the idea that if somebody is willing to use deadly physical force to commit a crime or to commit something upon you, and you're not willing to go up to that level, it's going to be really tough to win this fight. Something I'm just going to throw out there. I'm not using it to convince anybody that they need to consider a firearm, but you got to consider the mission you're asking of yourself. If somebody's willing to kill people, they're willing to employ that ultimate level of violence. And if all you're willing to do is spray them or tase them or hit them with the projectiles from the Berna, that may or may not work. And you got to be ready for that.
And I've tried to make the point too about that is that you might be just buying time for other people who have guns to show up to end the situation.
You're the speed bump. You're slowing people down, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know Ed. What else we got?
That was quite the long-winded answer for I don't want to kill someone. It is by far the most popular reason why somebody doesn't necessarily want to carry a gun or might want to explore these less lethal options as far as defending themselves.
That got the biggest answer because that's the biggest question.
That's the biggest question, right?
It is. But there was something that you had mentioned. I don't necessarily want to cause somebody harm. I just want to get away from the situation. And I would argue that any of the three that we previously mentioned, spray, taser, Berna, you're not going to cause arguably lasting harm.
Yes.
And you will get away from the situation.
More than likely, it won't be lasting harm, right?
Right.
But you're still hurting people. All these things hurt in some way.
Well,
Taser doesn't. No, I don't want to be tased either again.
But there's no long-lasting harm, I think, is what we're referring to, right? That's the thing. None of these will cause long-lasting harm.
Right.
But enough pain for compliance to get them to stop.
And it's pretty likely, if you look at the typical incident, okay, the mugger in the parking lot, the aggressor, the over-aggressive guy at the party or on the street, you're jogging and some guy wants to follow you a little bit, just turning around and maybe even displaying your spray or your taser or your Berna will probably be enough that they go, whoa, wait a minute.
That's enough. Yeah.
This victim is not what I thought it was going to be, and I don't want to play anymore, and I'm going to disengage, I'm going to run away.
Right.
Or they'll just back up, but at least you'll stop them.
Exactly.
And you won't even have to use it. You're just going to display it. Now, here's the interesting thing. You display a knife with the intent to cause harm or defense, or you're doing it illegally because you're at the wrong level of force, or you do so with a gun, there are some criminal charges that can come your way.
Right.
Okay? With the spray, the taser, and the Berna, they're a lot less to worry about. In fact, they're almost non-existent. You're going to probably have some interaction with law enforcement, but it's not going to be as severe as a menacing charge or a threatening assault with a deadly weapon.
On the civilian level, I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah.
You cannot brandish or menace somebody with a live firearm.
No.
Right?
No. You can only point guns at people that are trying to kill you.
That are deserving of it. That's right.
That's it. But if somebody's we talked about this a little earlier about in the legal area. Let's say you are running and you're on a trail or you're running down the street somewhere and somebody, is following you or they try to stop you and you whip out the spray and they run away. You really haven't committed a crime.
Not at all. Right.
And I'm pretty sure they're not going to call the cops and say, hey, I just wanted to talk to this person and they tried to spray me with it. They're probably just going to move on and wait for the next victim to come by.
Okay.
Even a taser or a Berna, you pull one of these things out, they're going to go, whoa, okay, I'm done. And your involvement is far, far less. You still want to call the cops afterwards. You still want to say, hey, I got to report this. What did you do?
Yeah, because there's some wacko around there trying to assault people. But yes,
Well, I pulled my spray out.
your legal liability is probably far less.
Yeah, I pulled my spray out. And the cops are going to okay, whatever, no
Right.
problem. But I pulled my gun up, pointed at them. Okay, we're going to talk for a little while. So yeah, getting away without causing any harm. I get the idea. I like it, but you might hurt them a little bit. But
Yeah,
it's still
just be aware
better
of that.
than the other options. Yeah.
Another big thing is I'm not trained to use a gun. By that same token, I don't want to lose the gun in a fight.
That's a legitimate problem that you could face if you aren't trained. How would we fix that? Get training. In the interim, these are options, but be aware, like the pepper spray could get taken away from you. The Berna could get taken away from you and used against you. So it doesn't completely mitigate that problem.
Right. I look at it this way, and I got a feeling this is where Ed might be going, but this is something that I've talked about in the past with this. If I have a firearm or a knife and they take it away from me and they try to use it against me, that's deadly physical force
It's
against
deadly,
me.
yeah.
And I have no defense right
There's
now.
no recourse,
I'm done.
right?
Right? So it's going to be very, very severe.
Right.
If they take my spray away from me and use it against me, it's going to be uncomfortable for a while.
But it's less severe.
They tase me, it's going to be uncomfortable for a while. They hit me with a Berna, I'm going to have a lot of welts and it's going to be painful.
It's going to be painful.
But I probably won't die. So again, less lethal is got some hidden benefits in a way.
Some lower consequence.
Lower consequences against you if you do lose your
Right.
your item. So I get that. Think about it this way. Let's get you trained so you don't lose it,
No matter what you're using.
no matter what you're using, and that you can retain your defensive tool and you don't have to worry about that at all.
Going on that, no takebacks in a gunfight. And I think that one really came up when we were talking about the idea that if you carry a concealed carry firearm, you are responsible for every bullet that leaves your gun, whether it's an effective shot or whether it's a miss. There is a lawyer attached to every single bullet that leaves that firearm. And whether or not, you succeeded in deterring the situation, that's going to be a bad day for you.
Well, not only do you own every bullet, you own whatever it hits. Start with spray. You miss the guy with spray.
Oh, well.
Okay. It's just going in the air. It only travels 15,
Probably not
20
going
feet
very far,
anyways.
right.
Right. You might get somebody next to him or somebody might walk into the stream, but it's not going to be a severe injury like it would be with a firearm or other tools.
Right.
The taser. You miss them with a taser, you better start running because you only got one shot on that thing. Let's say you totally miss, the guy ducks and you hit somebody behind him. Be careful of what you're doing. Yeah, because you can also shut it off really fast too, and then really, really.
That's what I mean. Like you don't have to continue to keep zapping them.
Yeah, profusely apologize, and hopefully they'll understand and they'll go, well, I can say I've been tased.
Right.
And with the Berna, well, you're going to have some welts to explain to somebody, and it's going to hurt them for a while, but it's still far better.
Lethality is far less, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So again, that whole less lethal thing can be an advantage in a crowd. If you miss, there's less legal consequences.
And then the final one, this actually came up with a close friend of mine, is my religion or my beliefs forbid me from killing or causing anybody grave deadly harm.
That's a nice religion. Again, I've done studies in religion, and most of them, they do have a set of rules for defense of self, defense of family, defense of your in fact, defense of your religion. The general trend is that you can't use it offensively. It's always in self-defense. Like you can't go off and hunt somebody down and kill them because then you'd be bad. But you can use it in self-defense, like in, the Old Testament we'll go with real quick. Everybody thinks it says, thou shalt not kill. It's incorrect. That's a lost in translation issue. It's actually, thou shalt not commit murder. There are religions of the religions of peace. There are some out there that say, what?
Commit any bodily harm.
You can't hurt anybody for any reason whatsoever because now you're violating, your basic tenets, and I get that. But basic human existence, we want to survive. I wouldn't be surprised that even if somebody who is very, very, very entrenched in a religion or their personal belief that they don't want to hurt somebody, there's going to come a point where they're going to say, you know what? I want to live, and I will do what it takes to make sure I can walk away.
But these things might give them an ability to defend themselves without doing something that is against their religion. Like,
Yes.
you're going to hurt someone, but it's not grievous bodily harm. It's not,
Right.
lethal force. So
Exactly,
It
yeah.
could work in that situation for them.
And it might give them, like going back to the whole I'm not ready to kill somebody thing real quick, it might give somebody some peace of mind. Having it with them,
Right.
and it's peace of mind for them, and that
Yep.
gives them that sense of peace in their own psyche. So they become calmer. It's a lot to think about. Adjusting the mindset. I'm going to defend myself against somebody who wants to hurt me or kill me. That's something not a lot of people think about on a regular basis. And, from our perspective, people should be thinking about their self-defense no matter what.
Right.
Going into our final section, whatever you get, whatever option you decide to use, whether it's spray, taser, Berna, or the other ones that we were talking about, you have to learn how to use them.
Yes.
You have to train. Now, training is going out and getting knowledge and skill.
From someone that
knows
has
what they're
some
doing?
expertise in that area.
Yeah.
Right?
But you got to train, and you got to practice too. What's the condition that we always say that you should train under whenever possible?
Oh, you need to train under stress.
Yeah.
You want to become proficient with your tool and then train that under stress.
Accessing it in a hurry.
Right. How am I gonna
going to
deploy?
controls intuitively, right?
Yep. Exactly. Well, and all of these things have nuance. Like
Yeah.
with Berna has some quirks on how it works. Pepper spray, you got to learn how the canister works and how far it shoots and how long it lasts. And I have people come to pepper spray class all the time that are carrying pepper spray, and they have literally no idea how that works. And they definitely have no idea how long it will last or how far it will shoot. So these are all things that you can learn through training.
Yeah, well, and I've had people come to Taser class that they found a way to buy one somewhere. I don't know where, doesn't matter. But they obtained it, cool. And they brought it to class, and they're like, I haven't taken it out of the box. I've had this for 6 months.
Yeah.
Well, that tool has been useless to you when you could have gotten training when you got it, and then it could have been
But you
useful
waited
to
6
you for the
months.
next 6 months.
Right.
Right? Think about things we're talking about. Well, think about incidents where we're talking about the use of less than lethal force.
Defensive encounters.
Defensive encounters, right? When do they typically happen?
At night or in low light conditions.
Low light conditions, yeah.
Absolutely.
It might be environmental low light, or it might be artificial low light.
Right.
You're just in a building and the lights go out, or you're in your home and you wake up and you forgot to turn the lights on, and there's somebody in the house. Understand what you can do in low light. Understand we do that as well.
And it's not just training, though. It's then practicing what you've learned.
Yeah.
So you need to take that and practice on your own.
So that's the cool thing with the Berna. I'll give that the advantage over taser and spray.
As far as practice?
Practicing with
Oh, yeah.
spray, unless you can buy the inert units, you're using up your pepper spray.
Right. You don't want to do that. Practicing with your live pepper spray, not recommended, folks. Definitely not recommended. But they do make inert units, and we use those in our training. And then I actually will send them home with the empty canister because they can practice deploying it.
Yeah.
And getting the
Turn it,
safety
push it,
off.
turn it, push it, do
or if they,
whatever.
change clothes, put winter clothing on, for the first time in 4 months. That's all we have in here is for summer, by the way. Rochester's 4 months. They know how to get it out of the pocket of that new jacket or whatever they're wearing. So you can train with it, but the Berna has advantage for sure.
Because you've got the practice rounds, you've got the kinetic rounds. You can use those
Which are reusable,
time
right?
and time again.
Yeah, they're perfect.
The one drawback for the taser is there are no practice cartridges for the taser.
No.
In the training class, we use live cartridges. We shoot at a inert target just so you get used to the deployment. They don't have training cartridges for those. So I would not advise practicing your taser after the class. Just learn. It's very simple. Just put the red dot where you want it to go, pull the trigger, and it'll work. The Berna actually kind of gets a nod because you can really practice with that thing. And the only thing you're really consuming is the CO2 cartridges.
Right.
And they're
Which are
pretty expensive.
Inexpensive. And you can do it at home.
And you can do it at home in your basement. Just put up a big heavy blanket. And trying to break any windows. I don't know, Ed, what else we got?
That's great. I want to thank you guys so much for coming on and being able to give us this insight, because you guys have used and deployed all of these less than lethal options for those who may not be fully committed or haven't gotten themselves a concealed carry firearm permit or their firearm yet. So this, I think, is a great episode for those people who want an alternative option. Guys, if you have made it all the way to the end of this episode for the better part of an hour, thank you so much for listening to us. Be sure to give us the usual podcast YouTube niceties, subscribe, like, comment. We do read the comments on the section, and if you have liked this podcast, make sure to subscribe to our Patreon so you can get exclusive content, and we will see you for the next one. Thank you, guys.
Remember, you are your own first responder.